So this week we're doing Yithro. Yithro is a famous parsha. Everyone knows it talks about the giving of the Torah. We'll spend some time talking on that, but there's so many other interesting things in the parsha that often gets overlooked because we spend so much time talking about this whole occasion of receiving the Torah. I mean, receiving the Torah is the one time where man and God touch, so to speak, where God sort of comes into this world in a way that makes it him revealed, so that everyone who was there, right, had a real experience, as they did in the week before with the splitting of the Red Sea. They did with the 10 plagues, but this is monumentous. I did something that will never happen again. But let's look at some of the other parts. First thing, it begins by telling us, "Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midyan Chosein Moshe Eskol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe LeYisrael." Right? Yisro heard. Who was Yisro? He was the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe. And what did he hear? All that God did for Moshe and the Jewish people. Right? So what? That's the question. So what? Everybody who was alive heard. We have a medrash that I mentioned before that says that the splitting of the Red Sea and the giving of the Torah, right, were so monumentous, everyone in the world heard about it. It said the splitting of the Red Sea was so amazing that every body of water in the world split. So my understanding of that is not that literally if a guy's sitting in London drinking a cup of tea while the sea split, that the cup of tea, the tea in the cup will split. What it means is, I believe, that just as the sea split was so amazing, in those days, the news got around the world immediately. And today, to say the news gets around the world is nothing. You can just tweet something and you can get the news before it even finishes happening. But then, you didn't have that. And for someone it was the other side of the world, to hear that God split a sea to save these people, right, was such an amazing story that everybody heard it. Right? So if everyone heard about the miracles that God did for the Jewish people, everyone, right, we'd understand that. So why does the Torah tell us Yisro heard? Who cares? Everybody heard. Of course Yisro heard. Right? So Rashi seems to be addressing this question in a very cryptic manner, which is his style. And the first Rashi says, Vayishma Yisro, Yisro heard. What does Rashi say about that? Ma shmu ashma v'ba. What did he hear? He heard in Cain. So he heard Kriyas Yamsu for Milchamas Amalek. He heard about the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek. So again, how does that answer our question? What did he hear? We know what he heard, everything that God did for the Jewish people. So those were two of the things. Okay, so Rashi's telling us those were the two things he heard. But everybody heard it. Right? So I purposely didn't stress it correctly. Because if you look at Rashi now, he says, Yisro heard, Mashmua, what did he hear? Shma beba. This is the important two words. He heard and he came. Everyone else in the world heard. And it didn't touch them. It didn't affect them. It didn't do anything to them. They were the same people afterwards. Oh, God split the Red Sea. Doesn't mean there's a God. It doesn't mean I'm going to follow him. It doesn't mean the world's any different. Nothing. I have to go on with life. I got to pay my bills. I got to take care of my family. I've got to go to the gym. I've got to do all the things I need to do. What do I, so it's very nice that God split the sea. Tell me something new. Right? Yisro says no. Yisro heard that God did this. This is unbelievable. This is life-changing, Yithro says. And I've got to go and do something about it. So he came. Right? What was it? He heard about the splitting of the Red Sea and the war with Amalek, and he said, this is so amazing, I have to be a part of this. I have to go. And he went. And he became a part of it. That's what singled Yithro out from everyone else. Yithro was unique in that he heard his messages. He heard what God was saying, and he did something about it. That's what made him different. Yes, he was an idol worshiper, and that his claim to fame was that Moshe was his son-in-law. But the fact was, Yithro was a truth seeker. He was trying to find himself. He was trying to find the answers to the world. Right? And he went and did it. While everybody else in the world said, that's nice, but I got to pay my taxes. Right? He said, no, that's not sufficient. I have to do something. And that's what made it that it's so important that firstly that Yithro has a parsha named for him, that God would actually name a parsha in memory of him, and that he's in the Torah because of what he did. But it goes even further than that. As it says, Yithro heard, right? Yishma Yithro, Cohen Midian. He was the Cohen of Midian. Then it tells us he was the father-in-law of Moshe. Well, we already know that from earlier, where it tells us the story of Moshe going and meeting his wife, and going to her father Yithro and asking him if he can marry her. Right? So why does the Torah tell us that he's again the wife of Moshe? And I think this answers an important question, which is that if you want to think about it, Moshe married the daughter of the Pope. He was the chief idol worshiper. He was the king of idol worship. And Moshe goes and marries the daughter of this guy. You'd say, couldn't Moshe pick like a more suitable family? Like today, our young kids, they want to get married, they have shidduchim, right? They have all, and what do the families do? You want your daughter to go out with my son? Well, I better check out your family. So I call up and ask questions about the family, and ask about the boy, and I ask about this, and I ask about this. And then I say, well, the family seems to be reasonably suited to us. The family are not criminals. They didn't convert to another religion. They seem to be good people. Okay, our kids can date each other. Now, I understand the need to do a certain amount of investigative work because our kids they go out for a purpose. They go out, the purpose is to get married. They don't go out just for fun. So when kids go out for fun, so over a period of time, they might find the right person, right? But they go through a lot of people until that point. In our case, we say, no, you only go out for a purpose, which is to get married. So the parents help in sort of trying to minimize and say, well, my son wants to have a woman who's interested in this. My son wants to become a doctor, and it's going to take a lot of hours, so he needs a woman who's prepared for that. My son wants to live in Jerusalem, so I need a woman for him that's prepared to live in Jerusalem. Now, why should he date someone who wants to live in Kansas? Right? He's not going to marry her because he wants to live in Jerusalem. So I'll take care of all that for them. Then when he meets somebody, all he has to do is see if he likes her, she's attractive to him, personality is what he wants, because everything else we've already taken care of. So I see the reason for it. So, but if that's the case, you don't think Moshe could have picked a better, more suitable wife? A wife whose father wasn't, the Dalai Lama? In other words, he might be a nice guy, and he might be a wise person, and he might be intelligent, but he's the idol worshiper. That's what it says. Kohen Midian. He was a priest of Midian, of idol worship. So wouldn't Moshe pick somebody more suitable? So the answer is that Moshe chose this purposely because of what it says, because of Yishma Moshe, Yithro, because Yithro heard. Because Yithro was a truth seeker, and Moshe understood that if I'm going to marry into a family, certainly I want to marry into a family that believes in one God. I want to be married to a family where I know that my wife is raised in monotheism. So then he marries into this family where they're not, right? So the answer is that he knew that eventually Yithro was going to. You didn't have to be a prophet, which he was, but you didn't have to be a prophet to know that eventually Yithro was going to find Judaism. Because Yithro was a seeker. We're told that Yithro tried and practiced every single religion that was around at that time. And he went to one and he tried it and he saw it was false. He rejected it. He went to another one. He tried it. He rejected it. Another one. He tried it and rejected it. Finally, he comes to Judaism and he sees it's right. And he stays with it. So therefore, that's what it means by Yithro heard. How was it that Moshe let him be his father-in-law? Because Yithro heard. Yithro heard and he did something about it. He looked for truth. He found truth. So that's the case. So you see an important message here, on many levels, but that a seeker of truth, who's really intellectually honest, will come to the truth. Right? A person who's already, they're already jaded, they're already cynical, are not going to come to the truth. If you go to a person like that and you tell them, you wouldn't believe what happened. Right? God revealed himself in the desert, and there were 3 million people there, and they got this thing called the Torah. And now the whole world is going to come to completion. And it was the most amazing thing. And they say, well, that's nice. And how's the stock market? Right? Well, okay, another piece of news. Right? That's, Yithro said, that's something I got to go look at. Maybe this is the truth. Maybe this is where God really is. So that's why it happened. So that's how the parsha begins. Yithro heard, right? And he was the Kohen, he was the father-in-law of Moshe, and he heard everything that God did for the Jewish people as he took them out of Egypt. So then it says, Vayikach Yithro chosin, Moshe, and then it tells us, Yithro took, who is he? He's the father-in-law of Moshe. That's Zipporah Eshes Moshe. He took Moshe's wife, who had been sent away by Moshe, right? Because it was dangerous what they were doing, and he's now bringing her back, right at this point. And ve'esh shnei baneha, and her 2 sons. So Moshe had 2 sons with his wife, and she took herself and her wives to a safe place. Right, and then it tells us a very funny thing. It says, "Asher Shem ha'echad Gershom." Right, one of the name of the first one was Gershom. Right, okay, that makes sense. The Shem ha'echad Gershom. Then it says, right, why? Ki Omar Ger Yisbe Eretz Nachriya, because I was a stranger in a strange land. Gershom is I was a stranger there. Then it says Shema Echad Eliezer, and the name of one is Eliezer. Ki Elokei Avi V'Ezri, because God saved me from the sword of Paro. Now, a couple of problems with this. First thing, it says Moshe had 2 sons. So what would you say? I have 2 sons. The first one's name is Gershom, and the second one's name is Eliezer. Right? That's normal speech. And this one's here it says Moshe had 2 sons. The first one's name is Gershom, and the first one's name is Eliezer. Right? Doesn't make sense, right? Or maybe it's more like one's name is Gershom, one's name is Eliezer. It's not a normal way of speaking. You have 1, you have 2. You don't have 1 and 1. Right? Why would the Torah tell us that way? The Torah is purposely writing this in an odd way. Right? The normative way would be he has 2 sons. The firstborn, right? The first one is Gershom. The second one is Eliezer. Right? It's not a slight; it's a fact. He's second born, so he's second. Right? He's a second son. He had a first son, he had a second son, he has a third son. So why do they do it this way? And this is an answer to tell us an important message, especially for parents, which was that Moshe was saying that he has 2 sons, and God's saying, you have 2 very different, very independent, very talented and flawed sons, just like everybody else in the world. Everybody has children. The children are talented, they're flawed, they need to learn, they have problems, things go well, things aren't so well. Their children are different from each other. Each one has his strength, each one has his weaknesses, each one has his potential. So God is telling us, you don't have a first son, which is a primary son, and then a second son who's secondary. You have 2 primary sons. You have 2 sons who are both singular. They're both premier. They're both important. They're both unique. Not you have 2. You have 2 individuals. Right? The difference between having a handful of sand and a handful of diamonds. A handful of sand is you got a bunch of sand. A handful of diamonds, you can tell me how many diamonds you got if you have a handful of diamonds. How many in your hand? You'll tell me. Why? Because you know how many. Because each one is important. Right? That's what it's telling us here. That when we have children, we need to realize that each child is different than the other. They need to be raised differently. They have to be looked at differently. For one son to simply be able to get up in the morning is an effort. He should be praised for it. And another son gets up in the morning with no problem at all. So he doesn't need praise for that. And all depending on the needs and the abilities of the children. Each one's different. That's why one of the reasons it says that. The second thing is we find a very interesting thing. Moshe is named himself. He gets the name Moshe because Pharaoh's daughter took him out of the water. So the one who was taken out of the water is him. And he's named for what happened to him. But when he has sons, he names them for himself also, not for themselves. He says, the first one's name is Gershom because I was a stranger in a strange land. Not them. They were born there. The second one's name is Eliezer because God saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. That Pharaoh wanted to kill me. Right? So it seems that Moshe was a bit self-centered. He names he's named for himself. And his kids are named for him. So it seems odd. Right? Why would he do such a thing? He should say, I'm named for myself, so my kids should be named for who they are. So the answer is that it's true on both levels. While Moshe clearly raised his children based on the fact, and gave them their names based on the facts of what he says. Moshe was a stranger in a strange land, and therefore he named his son that. But why didn't he reverse it? Why didn't he call the first one, God saved me from Pharaoh, and the second one, I was a stranger in a strange land? Right? Why didn't we say that, some other amazing thing that happened to Moshe? I saw a burning bush, name his kid Burning Bush. Like, why not? Why this in this order? And the answer is that while that these statements have to do with the life of Moshe, Moshe was able to look into the soul of his children and see that this described who they were. And this is something that the Medrash tells us, that Gemara tells us, that every parent has this ability. When a parent, we see it all the time. Parents will come to see me and they're having a dispute. What should we name our child? I want a name for my grandfather. My wife wants a name for her uncle. I don't know what to do. How do we're having an argument about it. My mother wants me to name for her father, and her mother wants her to name for her father, and we're having a disagreement. What do we do? Right? And they have this whole long thing goes back and forth, and then it comes the bris, and they give them a name. It's got nothing to do with what they said. Totally different. I said, what's going on here? You come in, this one wanted to name the kid Yitzchak, this one Yaakov. So, okay, you can say Yitzchak Yaakov. You can pick one. They named the kid Yecheskel. It's got nothing to do with it. Why did you do that? After you come in, you have this whole fight. Your mothers are all upset. You're all upset. And now you didn't even name the kid according to one. Now everybody's mad. Why did you do that? So the answer is that when a parent looks at their child when they're born, God gives them a smell of prophecy, a taste of prophecy. And they can look at that child and without necessarily even realizing it, and they look right into the soul of that child and they say, this is who this child is. This is based on the potential, the strengths, the weaknesses, the life they're going to have, which I don't necessarily know what that is. This is who they are. So they give that child a name. And I've had it so many times where parents will say, we had all these talks and arguments about what we're going to name the child. And then we looked at him, we knew his name was this. We just knew it. And that happens all the time. Because a child is given a name through this prophetic vision that every one of us has when we have children. And that idea, right, means that when Moshe named these kids, definitely he named them for the reason that he said. Because I was a stranger in a strange land. But that child has in his essence that he was a stranger in a strange land. And the other one, that Moshe was saved from the sword of Pharaoh, was true. But the essence of what that means was found within that child also. So therefore, both in this case, both are true. It's not that, because when Moshe is named, for instance, Moshe is the one who came out of the water, right? Moshe didn't take himself out of the water. Pharaoh's daughter took him out of the water. So Pharaoh says, I'm going to call him Moshe because I took him out of the water, right? So really, on one hand, she's the one who's naming him because of something she did, not because of who he was, because of what she did. But then it turns out that that's who he is. Moshe was. That was the essence of who he was, because she was able to see that, right? Because Moshe had numerous names, and so that's what it says. And then it goes on. So now beginning in verse 5, it says, Vayavo Yithro choy Moshe and Vanav Yithro, right? And they went to the desert, where they are now around the mountain of God, right? In other words, they're standing up at Mount Sinai. God is going to give them the Torah, and they camp outside the mountain. And God tells them that you have to stay here. You have to prepare for the giving of the Torah, right? And so Yithro was there with Moshe's family, as it says. But Yetzi Moshe across Chosna. Now what happens is, as soon as Moshe hears that his father-in-law is in town, his father-in-law, the pagan idol worshiper, is in town, Moshe goes out to greet him. It's very interesting. Moshe is the king. He's the king of the Jews, right? He's the head. And his father-in-law, who is clearly not a man of his caliber, comes to town. What does Moshe do? He says, well, when my father-in-law comes, my slaves will go get him and bring him to see me. My servants will get him for me. Right? Or he'll come to see me, and I'm the king. No, Moshe goes to see him. Moshe says, this is my father-in-law. Right? As a person, I have to respect this person. So and therefore I'm going to go see him. I remember hearing once that when the United States became a country in the 1700s, so I forgot who it was with, but there was George Washington was the president, and he went to New York, and there was a governor in New York, and they didn't know what the protocol was. When the president comes to your state, does the president come to see you, or do you go see the president? And they didn't know. So nobody went to see anybody. And he left. I forgot who the governor was. Because they had there was a protocol. But they hadn't created a protocol yet because it was a new country. Like, what would happen if, let's say, the king of Spain would go to England? would he go to the castle to see the King of England, or would he be in his hotel, so to speak, and the King of England would come see him? Right? I'm the host. Do I come and see you because I'm the host and I welcome you, or you're the guest and you come to see me? Right? Which is I don't know what the answer is. I'm not British, but in America they didn't know what to do, and I came up with an answer. I don't know that answer either, but they came up with an answer what the protocol is. So but here we have the Jewish protocol, which is Moshe knows that there's a mitzvah of honoring one's parents, and rabbinically there's a mitzvah to honor your in-laws. Right? It's not a Torah mitzvah because they're not my parents, but they're my wife's parents, and my wife's a part of me. So out of respect for my wife, I honor my in-laws like they're my parents. So Moshe gets up and he goes to see him, even though he was a lowly idol worshiper at this point, and Moshe was the king of the Hebrews. Nevertheless, Moshe says went out to go see his father-in-law. Right? Vayishtachavu, and he bowed down. Vayisaklo, and he kissed him. Vayishalo ish l're'ehu l'shalom, and each one asked, "How you doing?" Right? Vayavo, and he took his father-in-law and he brought him to his own tent. He brought him back to the palace. Right? That's how you're supposed to act. 396. Moshe the Chosna is called Asher Asa Hashem, and then Moshe tells him about all the things that happened, right? And on goes the story. Now, the next section, beginning on the same page, where it says Jethro's advice, or Shani in Hebrew, it tells us, and rather than reading it inside, I'll just tell you the story, and then we can talk about it in a minute, is that at this point, that we have a rule in the Torah. The Torah is, the Talmud tells us the Torah is not a history book. It contains history, but it is not a history book. Just like mitzvahs might be healthy, but they're not. It's not a medical book. Maybe you'll be healthier if you keep kosher. That has nothing to do with why we keep kosher, but it might be healthy. So too, right? The Torah is a history book. It talks about what happened in those days, but it's not a history book. Why is that? Because it's not in order. Because here we have Moshe sitting outside, judging the people. Right? In other words, the Torah has been given now. It's already given. It's already after the Torah is given. God gave him the Torah. Now he knows all the rules, but Moshe knows it all. Right? So if Moshe knows it all, and people come with questions, important questions, not important questions. What blessing do I make on an apple? What do I do over here? This person died. Who gets the inheritance, and how do they get inherited? And all these different rules. Right? So they all come to Moshe. So Yithro gets up in the morning and he sees Moshe sitting under a tree in the desert, and there's a line of 1,000 people standing in front of him. All right? And you standing there the whole day, waiting your turn to be able to ask your question to Moshe. Right? And Moshe is just sitting there a whole day answering questions. Yithro says, "This is not good. You can't run a country like this. You need to set up a system. You could have a Supreme Court, and you can have a lower court, and you can have a night court. They have different levels. So what you do is," he tells them, "go get the elders, the 70 elders. You teach the elders everything they need to know. Then under them we're going to have other judges, and under them we're going to have other judges." So now we've had about 4 different judges, right? Altogether, 4 different judges at different levels. Moshe is the highest. Below him are the 70 elders, who are like the next level. Below that are other great people. Below that are others. And Yithro says, this is how you set up a system. A person comes with a question, and they go to the lowest court. And there's 50 guys who can answer questions. So you wait in line. 50 guys takes a lot faster than one guy. So you go to those 50. Maybe they'll answer your question. Maybe your question's too advanced. So they'll kick you up to the next court. And now there's only 15 people there, not 50, because most of the answers got. Maybe they can answer your question, maybe not. If they can't, they'll kick you up to the higher court. So now there's only 5 people at that court, so you don't have to wait as long. And they'll answer more advanced questions. Let's say they can answer it, you're done. You can't answer it, they send you to Moshe. Right? You go to the elders and then to Moshe. Then Moshe answers those questions. What's that, 1 in 100? Right? It has to be that nobody below him knew the answer, because it's such a new or difficult question. So now we're at the top one. So that's what happens here. Moshe is sitting under a tree. Yithro comes by and says, "This is crazy. You can't run a country like this. You need to set up a system." And he sets up a system. And he says, if you look here on 397, what is this thing that you do to the people? Why do you sit alone with all the people standing by you from morning till evening? Right? Yithro is asking Moshe. So Moshe says, because the people come to me to seek God. When they have a matter, one comes to me, and I judge between a man and his fellow, and I make known the decrees of God. The father-in-law of Moshe says, the thing that you do is not good. You will surely become worn out, you as well as the people that is with you. For this matter is too hard for you, and you will not be able to do it alone. So listen to me. I'm going to advise you, and may God be with you. And then he goes through exactly what I just said, setting up a court system. Right? And he does it. And then if you turn to the next page, it says, Moshe listened, V'yishma Moshe. Moshe listened to what his father-in-law said. Right? He said, you're right. And he did everything that he said. And Moshe chose men, and he went through that, how he set it up, and he sets it up. And then it says, Moshe sent off his father-in-law, and he went to his land. Right? His father-in-law went back home. Right? So that story could be after the Torah is given. And we're about to begin the section where they're going to start get the Torah. This teaches us the fact that Ein Mukdam Umuchar b'Torah. Torah is not a history book. It's not written in order. Because, for instance, even when Yithro comes, right? It says Yithro comes, right? Right, and it says because he heard. Right? It says in one place he heard about the giving of the Torah. Well, the Torah hasn't been given yet. How could he hear about it? So he heard it's out of order. This could have been later. Other people say no. He heard that he was going to get the Torah. So there are some people who say that this is in order. Some people say it's out of order. But everyone agrees that it's not necessarily have to be in order. And you'll find many places in the Torah where it seems that things jump out of place. They jump ahead, they jump behind. There's like a narrative in the middle. It sounds like there's a commercial going on in the middle of a show. Right? These things are happening in the Torah because the Torah is not a particular book. It's all kinds of books. It's poetic. It's literal. It's metaphoric. It has history. It has medicine, but it's not a medicine book. It's not a history book. It's all kinds of things. Right? And that's how it works. So now, at this point, Moshe sends away his father-in-law. Now the Torah either continues, or it's now switching to a new section where it talks about the giving of the Torah. So it was in the 3rd month when the Jewish people went out from Egypt. They got to the wilderness of Sinai, and they went to all these different places. Then Moshe goes up to talk to God, and God calls him from the mountain, and he says, you shall say to the house of Jacob and relate to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to Egypt, that I have borne you on the wings of eagles and brought you to me. So, now some questions with this line. Here, they're at the point now where God's going to tell them the next thing is to prepare for receiving the Torah. But before he does it, he says, okay, Moshe, you're in charge of the Jewish people. So I want you to go and tell the Jewish people everything I'm going to tell you, right? Which he does. That's the Torah. But he says it in a funny way. He says, say it to the house of Jacob and relate it to the children of Israel. Well, the children of Israel and the house of Jacob are the same thing. Jacob and Israel is the same person, right? So who's the house of Jacob? The Jewish people. Who's the children of Israel? The Jewish people, the same people. So why does God say that? It says, so the commentary says because the house of Jacob are the women, and the children of Israel are the men. That's what God's saying. And Rashi talks about it. He says, Ta'kid l'bnei Yisrael. Rashi says, well, before that, Beis Yaakov, Ko Tomar. You should go say, B'lashon hazeh v'kaseder hazeh. Use these words in this order, God's saying. Sorry? God's saying, go say what I'm telling you in the way I tell you. Then, Beis Yaakov. What does it mean, the house of Jacob? Elu Hanashim. These are the men. The Hanashim. These are the women. You should speak to them in a nice tone. Right? Be polite and speak nicely. You don't want to scare them, upset them. Right? Women have more emotions in them. Right? But Tagid l'bnei Yisrael. Tagid means to make a statement. Right? Say it. Right? You should speak to the house of Israel. That's speak as a normal tone to a woman. But when you're speaking to the men, speak strongly. Right? Tagid is a stronger word. To the Bnei Israel. That's the men. Onshin v'dikduking, tell them the laws, tell them the punishments, what's going on, right? Parsh to Zacharim, explain to the men. Devarim hakashin, kagidin, tell them things that are as difficult as a tendon. And right, a tendon is a part of a person's body, is very strong. It's what holds your bones together. Right? So go and speak that way. In other words, God is saying to him, different people need to be related to differently. There's general rules, like in general, many women need to be spoken into in a less harsh tone, because they won't, if you speak harshly to them, they may not hear what you're saying, they only hear the emotion. Because women, I can relate that way. To women, words are connections, ways to connect with people. They talk to each other like to connect. Right? Men use words to tell you what to do. They command. They make statements. Women connect. Men make statements. So he says, he tells them, go speak to the women, because if you speak harshly to the women, they're not going to hear your words. They're going to just hear the harshness, because they won't be able to connect to you. They're going to see, why he's angry. Why is he angry? Why is he speaking like this? Why is he scaring us? And then, instead, speak normally. Speak with a nice voice to the women, so that they hear what you're saying. Because women are so attuned to how you say something. Like my wife would say to me, why are you angry? And I say, I'm not angry, but I hear it in your voice. Right? And I am angry, but I'm upset that I'm angry. It bothers me that I'm angry, so I don't want to say it, because I shouldn't be angry. Right? Or it has nothing to do with her. It has to do with something at work, and I'm having trouble getting rid of it. Right? But she hears it, right? So if Moshe speaks that way, they're going to hear his voice, but they're not going to hear his words, because they're concentrating on why is he angry. So speak nicely. But to the men are in another world anyways. They don't know what's going on. So you just tell them, listen, keep Shabbos or you're dead. Keep kosher or you're in trouble. Right? You don't say that to the women. You say that to the men. And that's what that line means. And then he says, Atem re'isem, you saw Asher asisi Mitzrayim, what I did to Egypt. V'asham eschem, and I took you al kanfei hanesharim, on the wings of eagles, out. Right? V'yavo eschem alai, and I brought you to me. So this is also an interesting point to know for the Torah. It's not as much the style of what we usually talk about, but just so you understand. The Torah is literal. It's literal. When the Torah tells you, right, wear tefillin, it means wear tefillin. It doesn't mean think about wearing tefillin. It says you have to keep kosher. It means you have to keep kosher. You have to kill an animal a certain way. It doesn't mean you have to think about killing him a certain way, or maybe you should kill him a certain way. We don't have 613 suggestions in the Torah. They're mitzvahs, right? So here, it says something that you can't take literally. It says, I took you out of Egypt on wings of eagles. Do you think God attached eagle wings to every Jew and told them to fly out? They didn't fly out. It says explicitly they walked out. So what does that mean? Clearly that's a metaphor, right? God is using an allegory. He's saying, I took them out of Egypt with strength, like an eagle is strong, and fast. Right? You came out of Egypt immediately, and nobody could stop you. You were powerful, and you were fast, like an eagle. But he didn't attach wings to us. So here we see an example where the Torah uses something that clearly is not literal. So there became an argument throughout history is if the Torah could be understood in a non-literal way. Right? The story of Adam and Eve, was it really Adam and Eve? Did they really have Cain and Abel? Did they really talk to a snake? Did he really give her something to eat? Literally? So there were people in history who said, based on what I showed you here, that the entire Torah can be understood as an allegory, as a metaphor. That has been rejected as not being accurate. That there is a way you can understand parts of the Torah as a metaphor, but that the Torah is also literally true. That's different with other books, right? If you read a book of poetry, it can't be literally true and also metaphorically true. If I say I love you like I love a sunrise, it's not literal, right? I don't really love a woman like I love a sunrise. It's very different. But I'm saying that as beautiful and wonderful and special as a sunrise is, so too are you to me, right? So in human talk, we can't say that it's literally true and metaphorically true, but God can. God has the ability. Where he took us out of the land of Egypt, he didn't attach wings to us, right? But when it says that they gathered around the mountain, Mount Sinai, that's literally true. It's literally, so the same book can have both in it. Very similar to how you and I speak. Sometimes we're literal, sometimes we're not literal. Sometimes we'll exaggerate in order to prove a point. I'll say, how do you do that? Everybody says it's wrong. Well, I think everybody says it wrong. There's no such thing. Everybody says anything. right? So how can I say everybody says it's wrong? Because I'm trying to prove a point to you. I'm using a metaphor. I'm saying this is so silly what you're doing that nobody would agree with you. Right? But of course somebody would agree with you, but they're also silly. Right? So sometimes I'm speaking literally. Sometimes I speak metaphorically. The Torah does the same. Right? And the important point is to know when. So clearly the wings of eagles is one of those examples. Right? Now at the bottom of 402 and 403 we begin the process of the Jews getting ready for the giving of the Torah. And he says, God says to Moshe, go to the people, sanctify them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their clothing. Let them be prepared for the third day, for on the third day Hashem will descend in the sight of the people on Sinai. You shall set boundaries for the people, saying, beware of going up the mountain. Okay. So here God says for 3 days, these called Shloshes Mehakbala, the 3 days of preparation. We keep this to some extent 3 days before Shavuos, which is when the Torah was given. And God tells them, you have to prepare yourself. How do you prepare yourself? So interestingly, you prepare yourself spiritually and physically. At first it says you have to be kadosh, right? They have to, 3 things of holiness, 3 days of holiness. Then it says wash your clothes. Like what's washing your clothes got to do with anything? Wash your clothes. Like, you've got dirty clothes. How much clothes are you going to have? They didn't have that many clothes. They were slaves. So let's say they had 2 outfits. So go wash your clothes. So you should be clean physically. You should feel clean. You should be clean. You should be dignified when I come to give you the Torah. And you should be holy. Both. God is addressing both the spiritual and physical side of a human being because both are necessities. And a lot of times we find that people who are not observant, they stress their physical side a lot. They eat healthy, and they do all types of athletics, and they do all types of things to stay healthy and to have a longer life and so forth. Then you have people who are observant who very often ignore the physical, and they don't care about eating correctly. They even care about eating kosher, and they don't care about exercising. They care about their exercise is walking to shul on Shabbos. Okay? They ignore the physical for the spiritual, and there are others who ignore the spiritual, the physical for the spiritual, and the spiritual for the physical. Right? You've got both. Right? That's pretty normal in the world. But God's telling you that's not how you do it. If you want to receive the Torah, you want to participate in probably the most amazing, extraordinary, and important act in the history of the world was created for this moment, for getting the Torah. Right? If you want to participate in that, you have to be spiritually and physically ready. Both. Why? Because human beings are a hybrid creation. We're not animals, and we're not angels. We're half and half. We're half angels, half animals. We have a body. We have waste like an animal. We have to eat like an animal. We have to procreate like an animal. However, we're like angels. We can think abstractly. We can do good deeds. We can care for others. We can help people. We can give charity. We can pray. We have a relationship with God. Those are all spiritual. We're the only entity in the world that's like that. That has 2 sides, right? And that's the struggle in our whole life is to do what the spiritual side wants. Right? Not to harm the physical side, but not to give in to the physical side, right? Which will harm the spiritual side. So God is saying both have to be prepared. Now, if you want to receive the Torah, you have to prepare yourself both ways. You can't ignore your physical body because you're religious, and you can't ignore your spirituality because you want to take care of your body. Both of them are necessary. And that's what that tells us here. Now, as we go on the page, you see here it begins by saying the day of the revelation on verse 16. And without reading it, we have a number of extraordinary things that happen. First thing is they wake up on this day now. Right? They've had their 3 days of preparation, and they wake up to the sound of a shofar blowing that's so loud that clearly a human's not doing it. Right? And it says that they saw sounds and they heard lights. There is a scientific explanation for this, and there is a name for it, and I guess it's happened, to individuals, but this happened to 3 million people all at one time. God just totally disrupted the laws of nature. Totally disrupted it. Like, you can see lightning and hear thunder. You can't hear lightning and see thunder. Right? It doesn't exist. Right? It might be the exact same thing, but one is hearing, one is seeing. But here it was reversed. Things that you saw, right, you heard it. and things that you would hear, you actually saw. Why? Because the experience of the giving of the Torah was such that all of the rules of nature had to be suspended. Because you have now the only time in history where God and man come together. They touch. Right? You know, like the famous painting with the man's reaching for God and God's reaching for man. So if you put the Torah in between the two, they touch. Because the Torah is there. That's what we have. We have the Torah is the way that man and God touch. God comes down on the mountain, man goes up on the mountain, suddenly humans and God become unified. Right? That's how we are and who we are. So that's why these things happen. So it says in the bottom of the page that Hashem descended on the mountain, and Hashem summons Moshe to come up to the top of the mountain. And Hashem says to Moshe, tell the people, don't follow you. Right? Why? Because Moshe was on a higher spiritual level. And he was able, because of his spirituality, he was able to participate in spiritual things, and it didn't hurt him negatively. We understand this in a physical sense. Let's look at it physically. If I would say, okay, come with me to the gym, I want you to bench press 200 pounds. Well, you won't be able to do it. It's not possible. You can't just walk in and do 200 pounds on your back with your chest. You can't. You have to practice. But if you practice, you'll be able to do it. You work on yourself every day, and you work out every other day or every day, whatever science tells us. Eventually your muscles will be large enough that you could lift 200 pounds without a problem. But today you can't, right? It takes time. You have to work on yourself to get there. That's in the physical world. That makes perfect sense. In the spiritual world, it's the same thing. If you give a spiritual experience to a person who's not spiritually prepared, you can have very negative ramifications. They can totally lose it. They can become psychotic. They could not hear it at all, not see it or hear it, totally miss it. They could die because their soul is affected so greatly, and they haven't worked out. It's like if I would take 200-pound weight and I would just say, okay, here, and put it and hand it to you and walk away. It's just going to fall on you. It's going to collapse. It'll destroy your chest. Right? It'll go boom. You can't hold it up. So if you're not spiritually prepared and you hear God speak, you actually hear the voice of God, you'll die. Same way, because your soul will depart from your body, because it's such a spiritual experience, you're not ready for it. But if you prepare yourself, you will be ready for it. So the Jews prepared themselves. They still weren't ready for it. It says that when God came down the mountain and he started saying the 10 Commandments, God's intent was to say all 10 Commandments out loud, and every person should hear. So that every Hebrew that was alive at that time would say, I participated in the giving of the Torah. I wasn't just there, I participated in it. And they could tell that to their children. I know this was true. I played a role. I heard God's voice, right? I was there. I didn't just go and watch somebody else hear God's voice, like every other religion has. I was there, right? So in order for them to do that, they had to prepare for 3 days. And even then, it wasn't enough. So it says, the Medrash tells us that when God gave the Torah, he started out with the first commandment. By the time he got through the second commandment, to begin the third, the Jews said, it's enough. You're going to kill us. We can't handle it. And it says actually, the Medrash says that they actually died. And God had to bring them back to life. Because their souls were so attracted by God speaking, they left their body. It went back to God. Right? It's just like if I tell you to lift 200 pounds and you never did it before, so I just drop it on you. It's not going to help you. It's just going to kill you. So too, the Spirit did that. So they said, God cut it, it's enough. Like, we just died. You got to bring us back to life. It's enough. Talk to Moshe. Don't talk to me. All right? Why? Because they weren't on that level. Moshe was on a higher level, and he was able to talk face to face to God, while the rest of the Jewish people couldn't. So it shows us the ability of a person. Just like in the physical world, if you work every day to be fit, you'll be fit. In the spiritual world, if you work every way to be fit spiritually, you'll be fit spiritually. It's a matter of working on yourself. And that's what this is telling us here. All right, and then it begins at 408, 409, starting to tell us the 10 Commandments. All right, and then it goes on, remember the Sabbath day, and so forth. You should not commit adultery, you shouldn't steal. So there's a couple of interesting things in here. Let's just see, we could spend our whole time just talking about the 10 Commandments and what it's really saying to us. So, first thing is, let's look at some of the interesting things offhand, just quickly. There's an idea that you're not supposed to lie. Right? You're not supposed to steal, not supposed to kill, not supposed to rape, not supposed to lie. Right? But the Torah doesn't say that. If you look in the Torah here, it doesn't say, it says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not rape. It doesn't say, thou shalt not lie. It says, from a lie, you should distance yourself. It means you shouldn't lie. But why does he change the words, adds all these extra words? Because sometimes it's a mitzvah to lie. Sometimes it's good to lie. It's right. Most of the time, you have to be careful. It's not good, but sometimes you have to. But what's the difference? For instance, we see in the Torah lies. We see Rivka telling Yaakov, tell your father you're Esau. You have Avram telling Sarah, tell these guys that you're my sister, not my wife. Yitzhak tells Rivka, tell them that you're my sister, not my wife. Right? You have God telling Abraham, your wife heard that she was going to have a baby. She laughed and she said, I'm so old, how can I have a baby? And she didn't say that. She said, my husband is so old, how can he give me a baby? Right? So God also lies. Right? So what's the common denominator in all these lies that makes it that you're allowed to, even though it says you should distance yourself? And the common denominator is that none of these cases are the people lying for their own good. They're lying for somebody else. And I always use the story that if a man is married and his wife comes to him and said, I went to Holt Renfrew and they had a $2,000 dress and it was on closeout for $150 and I put it on and it fit me so well I had to buy it. I want you to see it. But it was on closeout, I can't return it, but I really think you'll like it. And she comes out with it and it looks great. Looks great, but it's the wrong color. She's better in, let's say, black and it's green. So you don't really like green. She says, do you like this? You really like this? No. Now, you have to go through your head the following things. Number one, she can't return it. She can't. It's bought on closeout. Number two, right, if you tell her you don't like it, what's going to happen? She can't return it. It'll sit in the closet. So the $150 for a $2,000 dress is a great deal. But $150 for something that's going to sit in your closet is a waste, right? Number three, she bought this dress and thinks it's beautiful. And you don't. What are you going to do to her if you tell her it's not? Right? Now, there's one rule. If you look at the dress and it's embarrassing, right, there's something wrong with it, or it makes her look bad, so then you have to tell her the truth. You have to tell her, because that's objectively bad. Right, but if it's subjectively bad, that is, I prefer her in black. This is green. Green's not really your color. Let's say you're wearing green, you got red hair and freckles and blue eyes. It's not really fit. So so do you say that to her? So if it's not embarrassing, and you have all of these negatives by telling her the truth, so you don't tell her the truth. Don't tell her. Don't say it to her, because if you tell her that dress, right, I just don't like it, when in reality it's just the color you don't like. There's nothing wrong with it. She won't wear it. She'll feel bad. She'll feel she wasted money, right? And there'll be nothing that she can do, and she won't have your approval. So lie. Why? Not for you, for her dignity. Makes her feel better, right? So you do it, right? When God told Abraham, your wife lied. Your wife said, she laughed and said, how can I, have a baby, right? So really she said, how can my husband give me a baby? He's so old. So God is thinking the following. No man wants to know that his wife thinks he's old. Nobody wants to hear that, right? A man wants to feel that his wife thinks that he's still got it, right? Even if he's old. He doesn't want to hear it. What happens if God tells him the truth? That your wife said, oh, my husband's so old, how could he give me a baby? Well, why is God saying this at all? Why is he even contemplating talking to Abraham about it? Because Sarah has a misunderstanding about what God can do. God can do anything. God could give her a child, right? And God wants that Abraham should have a discussion with his wife so she should understand God, right? Does it make a difference that she said that my husband's old or I'm old? Doesn't make a difference as far as the message she needs to learn. So God says, why should I make him feel bad? If I say to him what she really said, he probably won't even hear the message. He's only going to hear that his wife thinks he's old, and then he's not going to hear the rest, and he's going to be upset with his wife, and there's no reason for that. So why should I make trouble between husband and wife? I'm going to tell him that she said that she's so old. Then he won't be upset, right? That's to help her. So that's why you find when you learn these mitzvahs that it doesn't say don't lie, because there are times when it's a mitzvah to lie, when you need to lie, and it's for the best. That's why sometimes when you meet people, especially with young people, when I remember this real clearly when I was like post-adolescent, and you'd have the kids would talk, and one would say to another one, you look so fat, and the person get all upset, and then we'd say, why do you say that for? They said, it's the truth. I'm always saying the truth. I'm not lying. I'm saying the truth, and it is the truth. The guy is fat, but you don't have to tell him, right? But telling the truth is not necessarily the right thing all the time. Sometimes not saying something is good. Sometimes lying is good. You just have to make sure that you're not lying to get yourself out of trouble, right? If I go and my wife says to me, I want you to put $100 in the bank, right? So I forget. And then because I didn't do it, she goes to the store and she can't buy anything. She's embarrassed in front of all these people. She's given her credit card and it's not working, right? So she calls me up and I say, oh, the bank made a mistake. I brought the money in, but the bank made a mistake. It's not my fault, right? And that's a lie, right? So what am I doing there? I'm getting myself out of trouble. I'm not helping her be more dignified, right? I should own up and say, yeah, you're right, I forgot, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to get humiliated in front of people. I didn't mean for that to happen. I'm sorry that it happened. Right? That's when you have to tell the truth. So there we see how it works. And that's just one of the examples. All right, we're down to our last minute. So let's just look at the last piece, which people don't usually get to. The last piece on 4:14 and 4:15 says, an altar of earth shall you make for me. God says you should make an altar out of dirt. Right? It says, Mizbeach Adama Tasali, Bezvach Elav Es Olasecha, and you should give all of your sacrifices on it. All right, all different ones. But then it says, Im Mizbeach Avanim Tasali, if you make for me a altar out of stones, Lo Tivne Esan Gazis. It says, right, don't make it out of stones that were cut with a knife, like that were hewed, and don't use a sword on it. Right, so you should God tells them, make one out of dirt. If you make one out of stone, this is how you do it. What's the difference? So God is sending us on many levels a statement, but just one of the levels is that a person looks at themselves like dirt. That is, not, you don't look at yourself like you're a nothing or that you're worthless. We have a dignity, we have a self-worth. But compared to God, I'm like dirt. I mean, God is all-knowing. I think I'm the smartest man in the world. God knows more. I think I'm the strongest man. God knows more. That can do more. Right? Whatever it is, God is way beyond me. Right? So when you make an altar to God, to pray to God, make it like a dhamma, like dirt. Remind yourself, you should make yourself an altar to God and keep yourself humble. Yeah, but if you want to make yourself into an altar of stone, right? That is, stone that has why would you make stones also from the earth? It's also low. It's not, a stone is not considered anything high. So you'd fulfill the same idea. So why then he has a rule, but you shouldn't cut the stone with a sword. So here it's talking about the idea that you cut stone with a sword is an implement of destruction. Right? It's power. It's a weapon. There's a place for weapons in the world. Right? We need weapons. We have to rid the world of evil. That you need a weapon. You need to defend yourself. You need a weapon. There's a place for weapons, but there's no place for weapons, right? When you're dealing with the inner essence of who you are, because who you are is not a warrior. You're not a fighter. You're a spiritual, physical being, right? Who has a relationship with God. Yes, sometimes you have to fight, but that's not who you are, right? It says that I don't usually quote Golda Meir, but Golda Meir made a statement once about the Arabs, and she said, in the future, we will not judge the Arabs for killing our kids. They're in a war. Come in, they kill our soldiers. There's our kids. They're 18 years old. We won't judge them for killing our kids, but we will judge them for making us kill their kids. That's something that we can't stand. We can't take. What's the difference? Of course she cares about our kids, and of course they'll be judged for that. But her point is that to make us the people, we are the moral leaders of the world. We're the ones who are supposed to take the world to perfection. We're supposed to educate people. We're supposed to make them kind, make them sophisticated, make them live in a world where you don't fight each other. And you forced us to become fighters. That's worse for us than our being victims. Being victims is bad enough, but for you make us perpetrators of evil, that we have to go and kill your kids, that's too far. That's too much, because that's not who we are. And that's what we mean when we say don't make yourself into an altar of stone and then use a sword to make the stone fit correctly. Because then you're saying that the essence of who you are is a soldier, is militant, is fighting, is violent. That's not who we are. There are times when we have to be violent, but we don't want to be violent. Right? And so that's what that message is. So that is the story of the giving of the Torah, leaving out the giving of the Torah. And I didn't have time to talk on it, but all you're going to hear about on Shabbos and then from everywhere you go is about the giving of the Torah, so I'll leave that for them, and we will do the other part, okay?